I try hard to fight against the thought that death is the only way to escape. Just a little. But on the other hand, I also fight against the idea that being alive is shameful. So, it's rather complicated, whether it's just anger, sadness, or the desire to die.
This complexity expresses the agony of being unable to choose anything. Nevertheless, even though Jinsu was not a student, one can imagine how much pain he felt. In many dramas, movies, and storytelling, suicide is often portrayed as an exile, as if escaping from that place. Right. The term exit comes up, which means escape. But this seems to transcend the meaning of escape. If it's not this, then there is no other way. Nothing at all. So it seems to have been even more desperate.
But I think that is not the answer.
It keeps instilled.
I think this is also what the writer wants to convey.
That's right.
Even if it is shameful, we must live. And we need to recognize that there are people who strive like that.
That's right. So earlier in chapter 2, it was not Dongho, but Jongtae. Jongtae kept saying that Jongdae must remember and not forget.
This time, it's about Sunju's sister. She was a seamstress in her 20s who washed the corpse together. The title is Eyes of the Night. It starts like this. Doesn't it seem like a different Eyes of the Night? Then Sunju says it's scary. How can you be so delicate? While saying this, she later recalls the part where she puts fruit in her mouth. In a way, it was a very warm time that I want to return to, but I can never go back. This was when Sunju's sister was sewing, and there were many movements regarding labor rights at that time. So while participating in that movement, she got arrested, was beaten, and her intestines were ruptured, causing pain. The contact with Seong-hee, who helped her a lot during that time, became vague because it must have been painful to see Seong-hee. After that, she came to Gwangju and became a seamstress. This was because she was blacklisted in Seoul and couldn't find a job anywhere, which led to her involvement in the May 18th incident. Once again, she was taken in and tortured. Although the extremely brutal scenes are not described in detail, it conveys a sense of what happened, almost like narrating it at a police station.
This indeed happened to me. It was truly there. And each scene, each paragraph, each sentence was so absolutely and unbelievably chilling. How could such things possibly happen? It was so frightening that I really felt like I didn't want to read it.
Yes, it's quite horrific, making it scary to even mention. In the beginning, it was said that the moon, the eye of the night, is frightening. And the title is The Eye of the Night. I thought about that. Why is it scary? Why was it expressed as scary? And why was this title chosen?
That's because Sister Sunju had someone she loved at the very end, but they couldn't be together. After that, she expressed that she wasn't free from the gaze of those looking at her, which is why I initially said it was like an eye. At night, it feels like the moon is watching me, and since I can see the moon wherever I go, it gives me the feeling that it keeps following me. This makes me feel like I'm still being watched, which might be a piece of trauma, and that's why I expressed it that way.
Hearing that makes it really scary. The full moon used to be something you could wish upon, with the moon rabbit and all, but after hearing that, it feels like something terrifying is always watching me from somewhere. Right. That's true.
That changed afterwards. Previously, as you mentioned earlier,
Something was also scary before. When sharing peaches, it's like, oh really? Yes, how can a person be so fragile? This scene comes up in the beginning.
even kind of thing is scary.
Because of this, the scary atmosphere. is given from the beginning, and the author, Han Kang, leads the mood of the entire chapter. I see. It feels like I'm being watched, with eyes constantly looking at me and following me. That's why it might be called Eyes. Don't die, please don't die, comes out at 5 a.m. I only have one thing to say when I meet my sister. If allowed. Please, if allowed. And then I briefly run and say, don't die, please don't die. I think this was a very impactful phrase. While reading the book, rather than worrying, I would think about whether dying would have been better. But no, it's saying not to die.
Still, it keeps saying that we must live.
Living is not a disgrace. I think I was really moved by this part. In the last chapter, Dongho's mother appears 30 years later. Earlier, the appearance of the old woman from the play is shown. The mother, reminiscent of that old woman, speaks in a very familiar dialect that doesn't feel awkward at all. So this grandmother recalls her son, who was 15 years old 30 years ago and has now grown into a middle-aged man, but still remains 15 years old in her memories. When he was born, he nursed from her uneven breasts. But he latched on well to both sides, causing them to sag together. It's hard to express how special Dong-ho is to this mother. Even when he was a child, he was so gentle, innocent, and kind while nursing. As the mother, who buried her son in her heart, reminisces about him, it makes me very sad. Before filming today, I was going back and forth to the bathroom looking for tissues. I've heard this story many times from other places as well.
In the very last chapter, I really burst into tears. The YouTuber Kim Gyo-ul, whom I often watch, also mentioned this, and I thought it wouldn't be easy to cry like that while reading the book. This was different from just watching a movie. It was the first book I've read that made me cry so much while reading.
In the epilogue, the author Han Kang makes a brief mention. When she meets Dong-ho's second brother, if it were a mother, she would have talked. When you contacted me, I was wondering whether to meet or talk about it. But if it were a mother, she would have held on and talked all day. It seems like the kind of content that would have been discussed all day. I'll read about how my child certainly started like this and how truly beautiful my final finale was. This scene is about when the two brothers went to school, and Dong-ho, feeling bored since he wasn't going to school yet, would lead his mom to his dad's workplace every day. Dong-ho likes sunlight, and when there's shade from the trees, he keeps leading his mom's hand to go towards the sunlight instead. It's nice to imagine that, saying, "Mom, let's go that way. If we're going, let's go where the sunlight is." I pretended to be unable to resist and walked endlessly while holding her hand. "Mom, over there in the bright place, there are many flowers. Why are we going to the dark place? Should we go that way, towards where the flowers bloom?" I am very sad. So, is there a more beautiful ending than this? I saw the ending of the book to the point where I wanted to, and since I kept talking about the pain and struggles earlier, I briefly thought that viewers might turn off the video. Nevertheless, author Han Kang continues to give courage. It's not just vaguely thinking that the future will be bright. I believe the message from author Han Kang is threefold. Let's remember that. Nevertheless, don't die. You must live. And let's go towards where the flowers bloom. I thought that might be the three phrases I want to say.
And that concludes all the content in the book. To be honest, this is my first book by author Han Kang, and it was really emotionally challenging for me while reading. Many people around me have also won the Nobel Prize in Literature, so it's like buying a book in a rush. But once you buy it, you feel like you won't be able to read it because it's too difficult. Many people have doubts about whether they can accept that content. However, personally, after reading it, I would say the expressiveness and the emotional impact conveyed within the sentences. I often thought that this person is not someone who suddenly gained attention by winning the Nobel Prize like a comet, but rather someone who truly deserves it. There are really great writers in Korea, and I was very happy to be able to savor and read each sentence of this author for the first time. I also want to read The Vegetarian and The Goodbye. I want to read this as well, so I bought it. That's why you bought 3 books, right?
No, they sell them as a set. So I bought the set. I have 2 books by the author Kang at home. So I decided to gift them to those who couldn't buy them. I have one for Y Sujong, who is quite famous, right? What is she famous for? She's famous, right? I really don't know, but I bought her book too, and I bought Suji's book as well. It's going to my house, but I don't know when it will arrive. It's in delivery, and I've been checking continuously. I'll keep asking when it will come and whether I've read it or not. Oh, I need to buy the set to get the goods. Of course, I used my points for that. Thank you, and I appreciate it. I think it would be good for me to read C as well.
Yes, I think C will feel very different as well. As you mentioned earlier, the expressiveness, saying it's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. It's not that descriptive phrases come out. If it becomes somewhat like a movie, I want to read it and experience it too.
Some people say that poetry is science. I don't fully agree with that, but I think I understand what they mean. It's not just a vague, haphazard sense of beauty. There are people who imagine scenes that can convey that feeling and write them as delicately as if carving with a chisel.
So it seems like you want to say there is a crack, but expressing it as science gives the feeling that there might be a formula inside.
Oh, so that's what you think.
This is Ian M. Cisco.
That's the theory of relativity, Einstein's theory of relativity. This is also a snake of rote education.
I don't know what it is.
I think the charm of editing will emerge. The Nobel Prize in Literature involves writing and style, but also how deeply one reflects on fundamental human issues. There can be significant pain and deficiency in everyone, and it requires courage to reveal that without shame or to face it directly. It might be possible when people resonate with that courage. Many writers mentioned as candidates for the Nobel Prize unfortunately do not win, but some write compellingly about the pain and suffering of the weak, taking risks and enduring their own struggles. Only then can we expect such outcomes. So I think it is only natural that author Han Kang won the Nobel Prize.
This is an achievement and a legacy that can be given to humanity.
Well, our country is overly obsessed with the Nobel Prize.
That's right.
He has received many awards. Many others in our country have received internationally renowned awards.
But one of the reasons the Nobel Prize receives so much attention is that it was first awarded to an Asian woman.
That also has significance. Anyway, that's being discussed a lot in other content.
And the fact that this book is being translated means that originally, if someone won the Nobel Prize in literature, we would have to learn that language to read the original text. But this time, I think it's great that we don't have to do that.
Yes. The morning after winning the Nobel Prize in Literature, everyone went crazy in the group chat. Right.
It started with messages congratulating.
It's a congrats message, but I read the text of the Nobel Prize in Literature.
Ha ha ha, what are you talking about?
That's right.
Awesome, that's right, that's right, that's right.
It was really interesting. After reading it, I thought about why the title was The Boy Comes while preparing for this broadcast. But this is just my opinion, so I don't know what others think. In the first chapter, it foreshadows that the boy will die. We already know about that incident. In the second chapter, through Jongdae's words, we also witness that Dong-ho has died. In the third chapter, I think Dong-ho's funeral was held in the form of a play. Of course, the family held a separate funeral, but a moment of the funeral appears within this book. In the fourth chapter, there is a photo of young students lying in a row, dead, which appears in the middle of the interview scene. In any case, Dong-ho vividly returns to us as a reality.
It approaches,
And it appears in front of Seonju's sister in the fifth chapter. Seonju's sister says something like, "the shimmering bluish darkness." There's a scene where she asks, "Is that you? Am I still alive? What did you come to say?" This connects with the earlier feelings of the young bird, or the shadows, overlapping with Jong-dae. You can think that Dong-ho's spirit has returned, and in the final sixth chapter, Dong-ho finally comes back and leads his mother's hand. "Go to the bright road, Mom, the road with flowers," and thus the boy comes. So in the end, after reading it all, you realize the boy has come, the pain and suffering of May 18th, and all the realities that existed then are collectively referred to as the boy, and that has come.
it seems to be approaching. It seems to describe what is coming to us.
That's right. So, after reading this book, the boy, who encompasses all of that, has come to us, and now it's an irreversible situation. Therefore, after reading this, we cannot go back to how things were before.
We keep questioning what we should do. As we raise questions, I think the title Human Acts is indeed excellently crafted. Human Acts reflects that since we have experienced such events, we must continuously, thoughtfully, and profoundly discuss how we should act as humans and how we should accept these situations. The phrase "the boy comes" seems to convey a message effectively in Korean, while the foreign edition's title Human Acts suggests that through this book, the author is questioning us.
What actions should we take as humans?
How should we act? And in chapter 3, there's a part where high school senior Yoon-suk sees water gushing from a fountain and calls to request it be turned off. In a way, it seems like it has no influence, yet I keep thinking that as an individual, it is an act of resistance.
We have to do it that way. I mean, how many people have died there, and in a way, that blood may not have dried yet. Yet we can shoot water up from the fountain. That is, it's an action that shouldn't be done, so I liked that it was a scene of continuous discussion. In many ways. Lastly, we have things we want to say to those watching this video. I became very interested in reading books, and I found that a really good documentary is coming out on EBS.
It's called Reader Survival, and it airs on Thursdays at 10:45. That's not an EBS official.
Are you suddenly advertising here?
The quality of EBS documentaries is quite high, so personally, I subscribe because I can't catch the 10:40 airing. I subscribe to the documentary for 4,500 won. And if you watch the documentary called Reader Survival, this episode is about why we read books. This documentary starts with the question of why we should read books, and such content appears in the second episode. It discusses how reading books can enhance empathy between humans. This is mentioned. And they conduct an experiment. At the end of the documentary, there is a situation where a man and a woman with completely different values meet and confront each other over a single topic. As they talked for about 30 minutes, it felt like I was talking to a wall. I don't understand why my opinion isn't being accepted. They continued to talk in this manner, and one of the good parts of the experiment is that they exchange books related to each other's opinions and read them. After that, they discuss the same topic again. By doing so, This time I understood why the other person had such thoughts. Because before that, I thought that they were just accepting everything I said as wrong and felt like I was being attacked. By accepting things in this way, reading the book, and then meeting to talk, it creates a shared understanding and empathy, realizing, you have that thought because of this and that. So I wonder if we are living a life that has become more polarized because of social media. So, in a way, reading might be one of the ways to escape this polarization. It brings about empathy through reading. That's great. So, I hope you definitely read the EBS documentary as well. Of course, this book. Since the subject of this book is sensitive, I think there are people who might express opposing opinions and say, you are wrong. So, as I mentioned earlier, experiencing it and reading the book might lead you to think, oh, I could think that way. Then you might wonder, what should I do? It would be good to reflect on that.
That's great. I have something similar. When I feel like my words might be ignored or not heard, I write a letter. A letter. In writing. Yes, in writing. In the moment I speak, I might think, oh, that's not it. But with writing, even though I'm not there, if the person starts reading, as long as I believe they will read on, the chances of my feelings being conveyed are higher. Writing has that power, and I really resonated with what Soo Jin said. I wanted to share my thoughts and reading tips one by one, but we read some really great sentences a few times in between. We didn't read a lot, but especially reading Han Kang's books aloud is wonderful. Poetry is not just about seeing the written words. Reading it out loud completes the experience. The tone, color, and mood of the voice that goes into it complete the poem. Therefore, the poem must include those colors as well, which is why Han Kang's books are described as poetic. So it's great for recitation. And in interviews, she mentions that she reads her own written work aloud. But the reason I'm talking about recitation now is that when we read books, whether in a cafe, library, or at home, our concentration has actually been stolen. So it's not that the book is the problem, but there are various reasons that make it difficult to read the book to the end while maintaining focus. There are many distractions. When you read aloud, the visual aspect of seeing with your eyes and the sound you produce, which then comes back to you audibly, engages various senses, allowing you to focus and enhancing your understanding. You can at least concentrate. Sometimes we just see with our eyes but have other thoughts in our heads. By reading aloud, there are advantages to maintaining that focus. Especially in Germany, as you can find elsewhere, children are often encouraged to read books aloud. Additionally, when we are very young and children don't know letters well, we read picture books to them. Therefore, reading books that come in through hearing is also very important. Also, many people are listening to platforms like Willa or Millie's Library, and reading aloud oneself greatly helps in focusing on the book and enhancing understanding. So, if you come across a good passage while reading and feel your concentration waning, if it's a situation where you can speak and it's not a very quiet study room, I recommend reading the book aloud. I think it's a really good tip. I also remember what you just mentioned about the EBS documentary. Got it. EBS documentary. So I should subscribe for 4,501. Yes, 4,501 a month. Got it. I will check it out. Everyone, likes and subscriptions are love. Have a happy day with books. This was Lee Jong-yoon and Jong Soo-jin from Book Consumption. Thank you. But what book are we doing next?
Next is